Hello, everybody. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. I'll give one more minute to let more people roll in and then we'll get started. Okay, well, let's get started. Thank you everybody for joining us today for the next Mortar Minutes webinar. My name is Jen Levison. I am content director at Mortar and Ecomedes and editor of our forum. And today our topic is going to be about lighting design in the hospitality sector. I'm thrilled to be joined by the team from Lighting Design Alliance and LEDCONN today for this conversation. They're going to be talking about working together as well as walking us through several projects that illustrate the depth and the capabilities of their work. Before I introduce Scott from LEDCONN, who will be our facilitator today, just wanted to run through a few housekeeping items. The webinar today will be recorded, so we'll be sure to share the link out after the fact. And then we will be taking questions. We'll be doing a Q&A at the end of the conversation. So I encourage you to add your questions to the chat or the Q&A features of the Zoom webinar throughout the conversations, and then we'll be getting to those questions at the very end. And then for all of our attendees today, you can sit back and relax. Your mics are muted and your cameras are off, so there's no concern of anything popping on or interrupting the conversation. So without further ado, I'd love to have Scott Uglow from LEDCONN. He's the architectural sales manager for their team, turn his camera on, and then he can kick off our conversation.
Hello.
Hi, Scott. Thanks for joining us today. I'm excited for the conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I want to thank the LDA team and everyone who's on the webinar for joining us today. So I'll just jump right into the introductions of the panel. We're welcome today with a wonderful company within Lighting Design Alliance. So just to do some brief introductions from LDA and our panels, we will have Ashley Yin, who is the associate principal at LDA. She studied at University of Southern California and received a Master of Building Science degree. She also studied at Southeast University in China and received a Bachelor of Science degree in Building Environment and Equipment Engineering. She joined LDA in 2010 and has worked on numerous projects, including the architectural and hospitality space with projects such as the Bellagio Shanghai Hotel Interior, the Mandalay Bay Skyfall Lounge. Ashley has also received a number of awards and merit and excellence from IES and IESNA. Welcome, Ashley. Next, we have Lindsay Perkins. She is another associate principal at LDA. She has studied at the University of California in Irvine and received a Master of Fine Arts degree in Lighting and Design. She also studied at University of Irvine and received a Bachelor of Arts in Design and Stage Management. Lindsay joined LDA in 2001, and she has worked on numerous projects in the architectural and hospitality space. Ashley has also received a number of awards of merit and excellence in a number of areas on projects such as the Vail Square Hotel and the Condominium Resort in Vail, Colorado. She's worked on the Cheesecake Factory chain and the Mayfair Supper Club in the Bellagio in Las Vegas. She has also received awards of merit for her work from IES, IESNA, and a governmental merit award. Welcome, Lindsay. Lindsay, do you want to turn on your camera?
Thank you.
Absolutely. Lastly, we have Andy Powell. Andy is the vice president at LDA. He studied at University of Kansas and received a Bachelor of Science degree in architectural engineering. He has an emphasis on electrical and illuminations engineering. Andy has been published in numerous lighting and architectural publications, and he is a frequent guest lecturer at a number of universities and associations. Andy is also a member of associations such as DLF and IESNA, where he is also a past president. Andy joined LDA in 1995 and has worked on numerous projects such as the Hollywood Bowl Foundation, Dodger Stadium, Sony ImageWorks, and the Las Vegas City Hall. Andy has also received a number of awards of merit and excellence from IES, IESNA, and the GW Award of Merit and the California Preservation Design Award. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you. Welcome.
Absolutely. So here's our panel. Just to kind of dive into things, we're just going to go over a few highlighted projects that the team here at LDA has worked on, and we're just going to go through design philosophy and just some backstory of how LDA kind of worked through these spaces. So a lot of great projects to work through here. We'll just jump right in. The first project is the Shanghai Bellagio, and Ashley, I believe you are the lead designer on this area. Wonderful space here, and just this is kind of an overall shot of the space. And I just want to get an intro into the overall design philosophy that you went through, and then what was the client looking for the design of the space?
Yes. So this is Shanghai Bellagio. It is the first Bellagio hotel in China and the second one in the world. So we started working on this project in 2014, and it took us 4 years to complete it. This is the grand lobby. And since this hotel is located at a prime location in Shanghai, it's close to the Bund, which is famous for its classical and historical building facades. So this hotel, as you can see, the design is trying to be extremely luxurious and also have this Barocco style from Italy and a mix of, Chinese historical, style. And you can see from this image, they use a lot of gold color and black and white, and a lot of marble and crystal are used in this space. Excuse me. And because of a lot of polished surfaces in this space, it makes our lighting a little tricky or challenged because too much, mirror surface. So we use a lot of cold lights in the space and let the sparkles coming from the crystal, the chandelier, the two crystal screens on the sides, and a lot of decorative elements.
Fantastic. Here's just another shot of the space from a different angle. Can we just touch on the chandelier fixture piece? Could you talk about that piece and where you sourced it from? And
yeah, so this chandelier is from Lasbeth, a European brand, and they had the manufacturer person install the chandelier on site, and they suspend this item. It took them 48 hours to put it up. So it's a big, very beautiful item in the space.
Yeah, well, I definitely think you nailed the luxury end of it, and that's a great chandelier piece. 48 hours of installation.
Yeah.
Moving on, let's zoom in on this integrated door system, and this is quite an architectural detail. Could you just talk about what we're looking at here and what lighting elements are integrated into this door?
Yeah, so from this image, it might be a little hard to tell. These panels in the middle of the frames, the door frames, they are actually backlit crystal panels. So when people talk about crystal, we usually think them as this clear material and shiny and with facets that we will externally light it and let it sparkle. That's how we envision it at the beginning. So we originally designed with adjustable accents from the ceiling above to try to create the sparkles. However, when the crystal panel arrived on site, we realized, no, that's not the crystal that we imagined. It is kind of this translucent material instead of, transparent. So what we talked with the interior designer, and we tried to figure a way to make this piece still a focal point, because it's right behind the register desk. It's the first thing you will see, I guess one of the things you will see when you first enter the space. So we tried to say what can we do? We came up with this idea of backlighted. But as you can see from this image, this panel is visible from both sides, back and front. That's why we use this double-sided light panel, the Lux Fit, inside the frame, and then have the two crisp panels in both sides to be illuminated. And also the doors are operable. So it was not an easy detail to figure out how to run wires and stuff, but we are so glad that the contractor helped us on the side to figure it out.
Right, and for reference, it sounds like this space has a lot of constraints, and lighting a detail like this. So just for reference, the wiring is actually managed through this beam here and out through an electronic hinge. So that collaboration with your contractor really kind of speaks volumes here.
Yes.
Moving on to another area in the Bellagio Shanghai, could you just talk about this space that we're looking at here? What's the design intent, and what is this hallway connecting?
Yes, so this is the hallway from the grand lobby we just saw. That's what you see in this image, the far end, and it's connecting to their Chinese restaurant, which is an existing building. So it's a kind of passage from new to the old part. And the two elevators on the right side are just serving the 4 stories Chinese restaurant in this hotel.
Great, and it looks like you have another backlighting piece here in this hallway.
Yes. Yes.
Just to hone in on the backlighting application, could you talk about it looks like a perforated metal. Could you just talk about the design of this backlit piece and how it flows into the other details in the space, such as these jars that are on display?
Yeah, so we're trying to create this very dramatic, entrance from the brighter hotel lobby to the more moodier, Chinese restaurant. The Chinese restaurant is this, in this historical building, and the interior designer wants to create this super moody and very old-timey kind of environment. So this space is trying to create this transition, both in light level wise and also in the theme. So this backlit piece, it was 3-layer, the light panel at the back, and then on top of that we have acrylic diffuser, and on top of that is the black metal screen you see here. So the contrast between the illuminated acrylic panel and the dark metal finish in the front really create this very strong background for any of the display in front. So the jars in front, they are highlighted by track lights above from the front, and so it will not be a complete silhouette when we have backlight panels behind them, I guess.
So it sounds like there's a lot of components that roll into the backlit feature. I'm curious, did you go through any process or design philosophies comparing different products to create this nice uniform backlight?
Yes, so we considered a couple of different ways in the beginning, like for example, just having linear fixture on top and bottom, but the interior designer preferred something more even and uniform. So we looked into, light panel versus the other kind of products with individual LEDs behind. Since this project is overseas in China, we have very limited, communication and opportunities to do mock-ups. So we want to play it safe. We want to make sure there's no dark spot or, image of LED dots behind the screen. So we decided to go with light panel because of the evenness. And we coordinate the sizes so the frame are behind the metal frame in front. So we won't see any seams to create this very super uniform lighting effect.
Great. That's it's such a great space, Ashley. Very well done. And I think I speak for everyone, and I think the awards speak for itself too, that you kind of nailed the luxury view there. So well done on the Bellagio Shanghai. Moving on, we have the US Bank lobby in Los Angeles. Andy, you'll speak to this one. I feel like you were a big part of the design of this space. So could you just talk about the space that we're looking at here and just go through the design philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, I'll even back out a little bit. Ashley gave a great background on the Bellagio. This building was an existing building. It's actually prior to us doing the Wilshire Grand Tower in downtown LA, this US Bank building was the tallest building in LA. And it's kind of famous. It's been in movies like Independence Day, where the alien ship blew it up, if you remember. But it's a fairly iconic skyscraper in LA. And there was a new owner that bought the building and decided that they wanted to completely renovate the lobby, the entrance lobby. And they wanted to put a sky deck up on, I think it was level 73, that people could pay and go in and go up to view, from the top of the building, basically. And so there was our scope of work not only included this lobby, it included some entrances into the side of the building to enter into a lobby that would take you up to the top of the building, to the sky deck. In addition to this main space you see here on the screen, if you imagine going past this luminous ceiling donut feature back into these passageways, there's the elevator core. Then we also did the elevator core. But mainly what I'm going to speak to is this lobby here with the luminous ceiling. The architect was Gensler, and they wanted to go for a very clean, modern look to this lobby. And what you see on sort of the middle top of the screen is a giant curving LED screen, high resolution LED screen. So that image changes. It could be video content, it could be whatever they want it to be. And that's kind of hard to see in this photo, but so there's tall 2-story windows on the right. That's where you enter in and can view from the street into this lobby. It's kind of hard to see, but along the ceiling on the right there, we have a series of adjustable downlights that actually cast and light the floor in that tall space. So we're trying to go very minimal and not see the lighting as much as possible. The luminous ceiling in that sort of what I call a donut, because in plan view, we'll see a plan view in a second, but it wraps around the elevator core and is the only light source in that space. And I don't want to get too ahead of you, but with luminous ceilings, there's always some challenges, and there's even some additional challenges here in California with our energy code. I believe this project was done about the same time frame as Ashley's project, around 2014, 2015-ish. So we were on, I believe, the previous Title 24 energy code, not the current one. Or actually, I think we've now switched on to even another one. So it might be 2 generations ago. But so we had some limitations on the watts per square foot we could do. And so that's one challenge. Another challenge is usually depth. How much depth do we have above that new mat material? In this case, it was a new mat, which is a kind of a translucent fabric material. In our case here, we didn't have much trouble with the depth. We had a good, I'd say, 1.5 feet space up there to work with. I'll talk a little bit in a second about some challenges around the columns, because we had some things that occur with the columns. But in this shot, I also wanted to point out the sort of glowing face on the security desk there, or the check-in desk. So I went back and looked at our documents. We actually did specify lighting for that feature. But what happened is they had a millwork company make it, who basically ignored what we had specified and provided, whatever they wanted for the LED strips in there. And it turned out that the color temperature of that was a little cooler than the color temperature that we used for our luminous ceiling. They eventually went back and changed that so that the color temperature is more matched.
Fantastic. So just kind of moving on, this is the plan view. So again, you mentioned the challenges that you faced with working around the columns within the donut backlit feature. Do you want to expand on that?
Yes. So once they started demoing the space and digging, into things, and they exposed that ceiling cavity up there where we were going to do this luminous ceiling, they found out that at the top of these columns, there was, I'm going to call it a capital. It was a structural, almost like you would imagine there being a footing at the base of the column. It was almost like a footing at the top of the column that reduced the height of the cavity that we could have in those highlighted yellow areas you see on the screen. And so then that, we thought, oh, we got a relatively easy luminous ceiling condition here. But then during construction, they brought that challenge to us. Okay, you have half the depth right there that you have everywhere else. So how are we going to make this an even effect? And what we ended up deciding to do is, because we had half the depth, we doubled the quantity of the light fixtures in there. By the way, these light fixtures were sort of this LED mesh type material that you can cut to different shapes. In the case of this, instead of running that material uniformly in the top of the luminous ceiling cavity, we couldn't really do that because of the energy code. So we did it in strips. They cut about 4-inch wide strips of this material and ran them in the pattern that you can see, the dashed lines that are kind of radiating along that donut shape. So in those yellow areas, we doubled the quantity of those strips, first of all, so that the new mat would be evenly illuminated, because the closer you get to the new mat, the more chance you get of having hot spots and gaps in between. But then that made those areas twice as well, probably more than twice as bright, because we're half the distance from the new mat and we have twice as many fixtures. So we put those areas in yellow on separate dimming zones, so that once it was all installed, we had the lighting control guy out there to set the light levels. We were able to dim down the areas in yellow to match the output of everything else. And it worked out very well. Everything looked very evenly illuminated in the end.
So we'll just kind of show the final shot here of that column space and the even illumination. Andy, I wanted to ask about, as you were troubleshooting this issue with the different plenum spaces. Could you just talk about the collaboration that you had with the contractors, with the manufacturers, just to kind of walk through this and troubleshoot the issue?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, the contractor is the one that, exposed the problem through an RFI, sent it to Gensler and us. And I would say they were very helpful all along the process. They could see that there was a problem there. And as I recall, the manufacturer, because we had to have more material. It wasn't a ton more, but we had to have more. My memory is that the manufacturer just gave them the product. So in other words, there wasn't a big cost adder to the thing. Now we did also have to add a dimming zone, which I think there was plenty of spares for that. So in the end, it was actually pretty painless as far as cost and everything. I think we were a little more stressed about it probably than anybody when we first saw the problem, thinking, okay, well, that's really different. We have two very different conditions there. How are we going to solve it?
Yeah.
But yeah, the process went pretty smooth once we came up with the solution.
Great. That's a good example of every party kind of working in collaboration to overcome an issue in the field. The last thing I want to touch on in a space like this, could you just comment on, there's a lot of natural light element. It's a large cavity to fill. Could you just talk about how you model your light simulations to get the right lighting effect with different components like a backlit ceiling and just the different variables there?
Yeah, so we were able to create, we got a model of this space from Gensler, and we were able to put that into AGI and set up a calculation. So we got the transmittance data from NewMat for that material, and obviously the photometric files from the lighting manufacturer. We set up a calculation. So because, we wanted to make sure we had enough light. We wanted to make sure we were meeting the energy code and everything. So I do believe we ended up maxing out the energy code because we also knew we could dim this. And so we wanted to be able to have enough light to, like you said, overcome the daylight in the space. And in this project, it worked pretty well. In the daytime, as you can see in this photo, it looks bright enough once it's cranked up. At nighttime, there is a dim setting, so it does dim at night because we don't need it to be as bright. I think the fact that we did do this 5, 6, 7 years ago allowed us to do that. I have a project that we did recently that finished last year with a luminous ceiling in a lobby with a 2-story glass space on it that the client actually felt it wasn't bright enough. And we maxed it out for the current tile 24. And so that was a little disappointing that the energy code is, it does keep getting ramped down further and further, but we're getting to the point where a luminous ceiling in a space that's daylit like this is not really feasible, because the comparison, when there's so much daylight coming in, the ceiling can look dark, or if it's not bright enough, they feel like it's dark. In that case, at nighttime, the space looked perfectly fine. The ceiling looked perfectly bright enough, but in the daytime, it just felt a little dull. And anyway, I think, there's becoming a little bit of pushback from the lighting design community in tile 24 recently to kind of say, hey, have we reached the max that we can cut? LEDs have been a great thing to help us meet the energy code and to continue to reduce those watts per square foot. But there is a practical limit, I think.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the insight there on that area. And then again, beautiful space and insight on not only overcoming an issue, but talking about Title 24 and the problems that brings to the surface. Moving along, we have Lindsay here who worked on the Mayfair Club. Lindsay, again, could you just give us a brief intro to this space here? Give us a overall design philosophy and challenges, and what was the client looking for?
Sure. So this is in Bellagio, but not the Shanghai Bellagio. This is in Las Vegas. It was an existing nightclub that was renovated to become this Mayfair supper club. It's inspired by a venue in London that has kind of a similar over-the-top interior design aesthetic. It's a cabaret space. It's kind of divided into 3 sections. So what we're seeing here is the front lounge. You go through the space into a dining room, which also has a performance stage, and they have live music. And then at the perimeter of the space is a like an enclosed patio type space that's has a different feel altogether. So the lighting was, a big part in supporting the interior design, which was spectacular and like I said, over the top designs. In this space, there's a lot to look at, a lot of sparkle and reflective surfaces. But I'll talk about a few different things. So the bar itself is has the bar top is backlit stone, and we went through a few iterations on that to get the final glowing effect. We started out with an edge lit panel, but because of VE and other considerations, we had changed it during the design to be a tape light, which I had done in some previous bar projects where they were able to create a cavity large enough to allow us to use tape on 3 or 4 inch on center spacing to create a fairly even appearance. But it ended up not working on this particular one. I wouldn't call it a mock-up necessarily, but we went to an early installation meeting on site, and it just wasn't working. And I think it was because of the scalloped edge at the front of the bar. There just wasn't really an easy way to lay out the tapes to fully illuminate the scalloped edges and to keep all the wiring consistent. It was just too much trouble in the field, and just didn't give us a successful end result when they did do a little section. So we ended up going back to an edge illuminated panel. And I think we did end up adding a tape at the end because the thickness of they maintained the thickness of the bar that they had created for the tape light. And so we needed a little extra to get lighting on that vertical face. There's also a tape light under the bar, which is a fairly typical application. And then the blue shell that you see above the bar actually conceals 2 shelves. This view, you can't really see it, but obviously if you sit at one end of the bar, you can look underneath it and see that those storage spaces behind there. And they wanted these glass panels to glow. So we did do some different mock-ups with that. We thought for a while that we wanted to illuminate them from the front. As you can see, there's a mirror on the ceiling, so you get some reflection, or I don't know if it's so obvious what it is, but it's a mirror. And we wanted to get plenty of light on the front and to show the texture of these glass panels. But in the end, it really just looked best from the back. But because there are 2 shelves there, what we did is we have a tape light on each side of the shelf. So there are 4 tape lights total, uplighting and kind of lighting the cavity behind here. And it is actually full of liquor bottles and extra glasses. And it's a useful functional space, but it's also, we were able to illuminate it pretty well there.
Great. That's a great example, especially that scalped stone application, the process of going through different products and value engineering, but then ultimately doing what looks best in terms of the design.
Yeah.
So just another space in this Mayfair Club, kind of, you know, we talk about that nice uniform light. Could you just talk about the backlit application that we're looking at here on this screen, and the challenges that you went through, and again, the product choices?
Sure. This is a bar that's in that middle dining room space, but the glass is actually used throughout. It was also at the back bar, in the lounge, and it's in the larger dining space, which we might see in a different photo. But it's a layered glass that has the fish images kind of sandwiched between layers of glass, so you get a lot of depth from it. And it really does look, it really tricks the eye when you're in the space. And we didn't really think about backlighting it because we wanted to maintain the darkness that you see here. So these panels are all edge lit. And before, on different projects, when I was trying to edge light glass, I usually would look to fiber optics. But the interior designer had done something similar with a similar type of glass before, and shared a detail where they edge lit it with a regular tape light in a channel to hold it. And it was pretty successful. So we were able to use a high powered tape to edge light the glass and get a lot of depth out of this effect. Just
Commenting on again, edge lighting it versus backlighting, could you just talk about the end effect that the tape light might provide versus doing like a backlit solution here?
Sure. Well, obviously, if we had backlit it similar to the screens that Ashley showed, we would have a more uniform light. And here you really see the effect around the edges. But that was kind of the aesthetic that the interior designers wanted to have. And they wanted to maintain that darkness in the center. So that's why we didn't look at backlighting these. We wanted to edge light them because we wanted to create that contrast between the bright edges and the darker center, which can be a little more mysterious and a little more, you know, you still see the images that are in there, but they're not as sharply defined. And you really get much more of a, I don't want to say a realistic aquarium look, because obviously the fish are static, and I don't see many aquariums that have edge lighting like this, but that idea that there's a pronounced light source and a gradation of light as you go towards the center of each panel.
Great. Yeah, that's a great application shot there. And I love how it almost edge lighting it brings that contrast for the actual fish more to life.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on to another area, this is I think the shot that you were referencing just now, but it looks like there's a really interesting application where you're kind of creating a backlit, you know, organic form here in the back of this dining room. Could you just talk about this application? What was the process for accomplishing this effect?
Well, this was actually the same application. What happened is that a lot of these fish panels were broken in transit. And so for the opening, which this picture was taken right around the opening, they were only able to put the fish panels in select locations, and they were all different sizes. So it was kind of a complicated game about where could we put the illuminated panels, and where would we have to put, what they ended up doing a silver leaf, which I think still has a very interesting effect. It was a little bright, I think, for us, because when you're sitting at that back banquette, you can really see the edge lit or the tape light without anything to receive it at the edge. So it was a little bit bright, but because we had all of these panels controlled together, we couldn't dim it down without dimming down the fish as well, which did not give as nice an effect. So this was temporary, but in the end, that whole back wall should be covered with fish. But the other application that we have here is the shell detail that you see scalloped over that. And that's another application where we went to the millwork shop with a couple of tape light options and looked to see what would work there. And what we ended up with is a side emitting tape so that we're not spilling a lot of light onto the ceiling, because as I said, it's, you know, a cabaret. We wanted to keep the ceiling and the atmosphere fairly dark in the dining room. So we just wanted the light on the shelves. And so that's how we ended up lighting this detail, and it goes all the way around the room.
Yeah, that's a great detail piece, and especially some very great millwork to be done with that shell. Could you just talk about the process for again finding the right angle for this cove light to project the right amount of light onto the shell work there?
Yes, well, yes. So one of the challenges was the scallop shape that it has. If we wanted to use a 45-degree channel or to turn the tape on its side to shine at the wall as opposed to at the ceiling, we were kind of constricted because of the curve of the scallop. A typical tape light doesn't want to bend in that direction. And I suppose we could have looked at an LED neon type of product, but at the time we didn't. So we ended up going with a regular side emitting tape so that we could easily make those bends of the scallops, but still have the light directed at the wall where we wanted it and not at the ceiling where we didn't.
Great. Again, another fantastic space. And again, the awards speak for themselves there. So the last project I want to talk about, and more kind of a general discourse here before we jump into the Q&A. I know every project we seem to face is we go up against budgeting efforts. So I just wanted to bring a LEDCONN project to the table where we actually had a large cavity space and actually went through a value engineering effort where we used a lower footprint material just to bring the cost down, especially when we're dealing with backlighting a large area surface. Could you just talk from a lighting designer's perspective about how you work through value engineering in general and just the different challenges you face there? I'll just kind of open it up to everyone on the panel here.
Well, I guess I'll chime in first. I too had a project very similar to this, where we had a wall that we wanted to backlit. It didn't have a graphic on it like that, but it was just an interesting glass wall in a lobby of another office building. But there too, we had a limited cavity, and there too, we originally wanted to have a particular product that they decided was too expensive. You know, it was a lot of square footage we had to cover. So we ended up with a solution similar to what's on the screen there. Strip lights that were mounted a certain distance apart. We were able to mock up a little bit to see how far could we spread them apart, because the fewer of them, the better budget-wise it was. And it turned out well in the end. So budget is usually an issue on almost every project, unfortunately, but there are a few workarounds.
Yeah, I think being able to mock up with the materials can be very helpful, because, you know, when we first hear that we are going to be backlighting a material, we want the most uniform effect that we can get, unless, you know, like we mentioned on some others, that a gradation is part of the aesthetic that we want to achieve. But I think that, you know, we tend to automatically go towards products that we know are going to give us a perfectly uniform effect with very minimal spacing. And so when, you know, these budget challenges come up and we find that we need to look at other solutions, it's really important to be able to get our hands on the material. And sometimes we we don't have a big enough sample, or the interior designers in New York or London. And, you know, it's not so easy to share these experiments that we might do. But, you know, it turns out that, oh, if we add a piece of diffusion, perhaps we can get away with something like the product here, where, you know, we have greater spacing between the diodes. That helps with budget, that helps with energy code. And, you know, we're able to maintain the original effect that we wanted without compromising. But if we don't have a sample to play with, then it's, you know, it's going to be a real gamble, and nobody wants to say, oh yeah, this will work, without having seen it beforehand.
Yeah, I think the owners of the projects, they want it to turn out good. They don't want to spend any amount of money to have a failed solution in the end. So I do think it's important when we're hired on projects to be hired for full scope throughout construction, so that we're involved in those solutions. We have had projects, some overseas projects, where we've done the concept design and then we're out of it. And then we get a call a couple of years later that, why does it look so terrible? Well, you know, you changed our design. You VE'd it, you went to something that didn't work. So then we help them fix it. But it's much better to do it right the first time and be involved.
Ashley, do you have any?
Yeah, I totally agree. And also, I mean, to re-emphasize the importance of markup, sometimes it's not just about, you know, the brightness or evenness. Sometimes the diffuser or the material that we backlight, the color itself will, you know, need to be marked up with different colored LED sources behind it, because it's going to impact the final product a lot. Sometimes we thought we want to use warm white because the entire room is warm white, but the material in front of it has this cool color tone. So sometimes we will need to adjust it just based on the interior design.
Yeah, that's a good point. Some materials look dingy with a warm white backlight, and it can be very difficult to convince some people of that without seeing it, or to even anticipate it.
Right.
Thanks for that, the comments there on just challenges with budgeting efforts. So with that, I'm just gonna go ahead and open it up to questions in the general Q&A for our panels. Again, a final thanks to all of our panels. That was some really great insight into your projects. They all look like very beautiful spaces. So with that, I'll mute myself and let the questions roll in.
No, thank you all very much. Those projects are gorgeous, and the pictures, I'm just barely do them justice, I'm sure, to in person. But we do have some really great Q&A in the chat, etc. So I will just jump in, and anyone is open to take the answers on these. But our first question is, in what projects do the Title 24 limitations become a problem? Is it overhead and decorative projects?
I'll start again.
Thanks, Andy.
Absolutely. I probably have 5 or 6 projects right now that I'm struggling through the decorative fixture maze in Title 24. Partly because, well, mainly I think because a lot of decorative manufacturers are still using medium-based sockets. So they're saying, you know, oh, we recommend you screw in an LED bulb in there, and that's great. But Title 24 makes us take the rating of that socket. And so time and time again, I'm being asked by the interior designer and the architect and the client to help them get through this energy code stuff, and we find that the sockets are rated for 60 watts, 100 watts, and it's totally blowing us out of the water on the energy code. So, and a lot of these off-the-shelf manufacturers will not do a a custom max wattage sticker, which is one way to kind of get around that. But a custom manufacturer will do that. But if it's an off-the-shelf decorative fixture, which most likely is coming from China or somewhere overseas, they just don't have the capability, or they haven't at least decided that they need to have the capability to put a max wattage sticker on the sockets that would allow us to meet TAL 24. So, and then there's a whole nother thing with dimming. If you're going to have a screw-in LED lamp, is it actually going to dim well? So there ends up becoming this whole process of what's our experience, specifying lamps that we know may work with that particular dimming system. But then oftentimes we go on site and they've ignored our lamp spec and gone down to Home Depot and bought whatever they wanted, and lo and behold, it's flickering.
Mhm.
And I was going to say, I thought it was a little bit easier now in a way because Title 24 has become more accepting of the medium base socket. Whereas there for a while, 8 or 10 years ago, I had to beg all of the manufacturers and interior designers to use the GU24 base. And now I find that, on those projects, I'm getting calls from people who are saying, I can't find these lamps anymore. So, and dimming those was a real challenge. So I guess it gets different, but it doesn't get easier maybe.
Yeah, and I agree about the GU24 base, because when I did my own house renovation here, I had to figure out how I was going to do the exterior sconces on my house and meet the energy code. And I decided to go with the GU24 base. And as I go to Home Depot to buy my own lamps, there might be half a dozen manufacturers of medium base screw-in LEDs, but there might be only one GU24 lamp on that shelf that I can use. And so, yeah, I'm nervous that that's going to go away.
Mhm. Thank you both for weighing in on that. Lindsay, we have a question on the Mayfair Club project. Is this just bare tape, or were optics used to project the light further into the display?
Talking about the fish, the edge-lit fish, I assume. No, we did not. I don't think that we did use any other optics. We had a channel that was fairly deep, so it would cut out some of the spill light. Obviously, we didn't need it to be 120 degree distribution. But I think the channel itself was just kind of blocking that spill light and probably redirecting a little bit of it. But we mainly relied on the high output of the tape and that channel to keep the light aimed. And like I said, where we didn't have the glass panels for opening, it was a little bit glary. But when the glass panels were installed, it really was able to capture that light and funnel it into the glass itself.
Awesome. And sorry, got to come back, not on mute again. But there's another follow-up on the Mayfair project. How did you light all of the small shells and the beautiful bar space?
The blue shells above the bar are lit with basically 4 runs of tape. There are 2 runs on the bottom shelf, one on the outside and one on the inside, and 2 runs in. There's a mid-level shelf that's about the middle of the middle row of shelves. But like I said, if you're sitting at the bar, we couldn't do anything uniform there, because you can actually look in and see the shelves and see the back of the shelves if you're at the right position in the bar. So we had to just create a lot of light bouncing around in this cavity, and it bounces off the bottles and the spare glasses and everything. And that's how we got that effect. And they were turned up pretty high, if I recall, to try to get as much punch through the glass as we could, because they were fairly thick panels with a lot of texture and color to them.
Wonderful, thank you. And then one last question for everyone on the panel. What's the most difficult lighting challenge you've ever been given? I know. It's like, I'm not going to pick someone to start, but if anyone has anything to add in.
Most difficult lighting challenge.
I think my most difficult lighting challenge is to light up an exterior pool deck with the required light level, but still comfortable for the swimmers. It has
Las Vegas?
my problem was in China, but still the light level is about the same as Vegas, and it's a resort hotel. It's a huge pool as well, and it was so difficult.
Ashley's touched on my latest, greatest pet peeve. We're finding that many cities in the US are now coming up with pretty outlandish outdoor pool lighting requirements. And I think these are being done with the idea of health and safety, but I feel that they are creating the exact opposite conditions. And every city is different. So I don't know. I personally have started looking into the IES and maybe trying to become active on the committee that might be involved with writing. I don't know if it's the outdoor lighting committee or which one it is, but it's in just the last few years, it seems to me anyway, like this has gotten a little bit out of control. So I don't want to get on my big soapbox, but Ashley's right on. It is extremely challenging to light an outdoor pool deck and create any sort of space that anybody would want to actually be in and experience.
Yeah, I've had projects in Las Vegas where they have planned to renovate a pool deck and then decided they didn't want to do it because they would have to bring it up to the new code. And it's just would destroy what they had created already. So I think that that's a very difficult lighting challenge. I work on a lot of renovation projects myself. And so to me, the constant challenge is working without enough information. You can create plans and may try to reuse existing equipment, but it's very difficult to know what kind of conditions you're going to find until the design process is pretty much over and the construction phase has begun. And, you end up doing a lot of redesign on the fly, or, you think about all the wasted time and all the considerations that you did, because really it was like, probably should have torn it apart to start with and just to see what was happening, and then started the design.
Thank you all very much for your candid answers on that. I think we could have other conversations around all of those. But Scott, is there anything else that you wanted to ask before we wrapped up for today, or are you good on your end?
No, I'm good on my end. Again, that was all such great insight, and I appreciate the panel for taking the time and wealth of knowledge in all the questions and all those projects. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you everyone very much. We will be sending out a follow-up email, including a recording for today's conversation and contact information for the panel. So you can reach out, connect on LinkedIn, and keep the conversation going. So thank you everyone for joining us. And thank you very much to all of our panelists, and Scott, you as well, for today's conversation.
Just one final note. I do know that this will be recorded and it'll be available for rewatching on the LEDCONN website. Jen, could you advise where on the Mortar website we could find this video if we wanted to pass it along?
Yes, most definitely. So you'll receive it in your inbox, and it'll also live in our Learning Lounge. So learninglounge.mortar.com. So you'll see this recording as well as all previous Mortar Minutes recordings. It'll be a shareable link as well. So you'll be able to rewatch at your convenience.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, everybody. Have a great rest of your Tuesday.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.